Well, hello, folks. I'm going to really try hard to keep this short today. I probably should write notes or something to constrain myself a bit when I do these kinds of talks. I'm a little bit hazy today because yesterday I celebrated my birthday with a bunch of local friends in a couple different locations, and it was quite fun. And I promised myself yesterday that if I survived the binge, I would be a good boy until next summer. So we'll see how that works out. In everything, moderation. But anyhow, yesterday I had quite a lot of red wine, so my brain is slow today. So I'm going to, well, I want to make a piece called The Vietnamization of the World. And what I'm really talking about is this kind of march to World War III that seems apparent. And I don't know if that'll happen. Nobody does. But, just any effort put towards war fighting and making war rather than peace is stupid at this particular moment in history. We have a lot of things that we could be focusing on and using our precious resources and energy on rather than these stupid conflicts. I'd like to remind people that for centuries, especially the Anglo world, the Brits and the Europeans, have had a problem with Russia, right? It's a big beast to the east, and there have been worries and concerns. But, if you look at history, how many times has Europe invaded Russia? And how many times has Russia invaded Europe? So obviously, if you go way, way back and you're talking about the hordes and the Scythians and Attila the Hun, I don't know. Where do you draw the line? You have to go to the Eastern Slavs, but not as far as Mongolia, or to the Caspian Sea, but not as far as Turkey. I mean, all these borders over time. But at least over the last several hundred years, let's pretend that we're talking about from the 1500s on. It's been a thing. So we know what happened in World War II. We know what happened in the First World War, the Crimean War, that particular one back in the day. We know what happened we know what happened with the fall of the Soviet Union and the Cold War and all that. There's so much good information about these things now because they're relatively older events, and there has been a lot of people over the generations researching and writing about these things. And of course, depending on who you're reading and when they lived, all of these accounts are rather biased in one way or another because they're telling a story, history. And so they have a narrative. And over time, we can pick and choose narratives and histories that we can more or less trust and understand within their context, what they're trying to say and how accurate they are and what lines of evidence they're looking at and so on, what perspective they have, what point of view they have, all that kind of stuff. And one of these histories is the Vietnam War, 20 years from 55 to 75, and we have other ones. So Vietnamization, what do I mean? Well, I'll explore that in a later video, but how about the Afghanization of the war in Afghanistan? We tried many times to get our proxies or our current allies, local allies, to do the fighting and to accomplish whatever our geopolitical will was, whatever the CIA wanted to get done for the institutions, right? I mean, in my opinion, all of our institutional leaders, whether they're hedge fund CEOs, bank CEOs, politicians, corporate CEOs, are suffering from a kind of ideological brain sludge. And they're not fit to lead in the 21st century because of the predicament we find ourselves in. But this video isn't about that predicament. I love my overshootology and my collapsology to bits, but we don't have to go there right now. We just have to understand that at the base of it all is that. So when the neoliberal rock star Bill Clinton said, "It's the economy, stupid," we can now say it's overshoot, stupid. And if you look into physics and biology and understand the limits to growth and so on, a finite planet with finite resources and whatnot, you can understand why overshootology is an important subject and is, at present, the crux of the biscuit. Of course, we can go on to ignoring it because we have better things to do with our time. And a lot of people are just getting on with life and having a good time if they can afford it. And if they can't, they're just trying to survive. We always say that here. I always say that. So no judgment. It is what it is. And unfortunately, I hate saying that, but, it is what it is. But these people who are thinking they're so damn smart, I mean, they say all the time, we don't kill Russia if we don't fragment it, frag it, break it apart into constituencies that we control. They're going to take over the world and we're all going to be speaking Russian. Sparuski unupunamayu, da, America. It's so silly. It's not going to happen. Russia's not going to invade China's not going to invade California. But we are going to continually put pressure on China and Russia, our enemies, and our enemies are, please try to learn about this and understand it. Our enemies are anyone who goes against Western capital, Western finance, Anglo finance, Anglophone finance, the Germans, the French, the Italians, the Swedes, whatever. These people are bit players now and have been for a long time, since after World War II. So it's the Anglophone, right? It's the city on the hill. It's America inheriting the legacy of the Greco-Roman civilization, which is in and of itself an erroneous narrative. But anyway, we believe we're supreme and only our way of looking at the world and how to live in the world is important and valid, and all the rest can go to hell. Even with soft diplomacy or soft power, Indians and Chinese people and Africans want to have nice stuff and want to get rich and so on. But we're beyond that now. It's not going to happen for everybody, unfortunately, because of a number of reasons. But overshoot is one, and climate change is another one. But these are inevitable, so I'm going to stop the video and continue with voiceover to give some contemporary context as an introduction to the Vietnamization of the world, which I'll do in another video. I'll probably write something first. But I want to look at several people: Simplicius from Substack, the Honest Sorcerer, B from Substack, who I'm a particularly loving fan of, whatever you want to say. And then another journalist who does good work, Kit Clarenberg. And you don't like these people because you ingest corporate media. It's your habit, it's what you're used to. So whatever they say, it just gets programmed into you and you just accept it. Because thinking is hard work, researching is hard work, reading is hard work. And I'm talking about reading books and things. So long reads. And you probably don't have time for that, which is fine. I'm not judging. Okay, please don't misunderstand me. If you're watching this, you're probably watching me, the two or three of you, because you think that maybe I have something that might be of interest and so on. But I'm fairly confident in my worldview at this point, having been a very curious person my whole life and getting up there in age and whatnot, and not giving up on trying to educate myself and figure things out because I enjoy it. It's just in my DNA, I guess. But we don't want to hear from these other journalists that have been blackballed, that don't read the script, which is given to them by PR firms and think tanks and marketing agencies and so on, to support the empire, whatever you want to call it, the global hegemony of the Anglo financial industrial complex or whatever. Anyway, you know, if it's not Fareed Zakaria saying something, then it's not serious journalism. That's total bullshit, by the way. Most of these independent journalists that I look at, anyway, I don't know, I don't look at everybody, obviously. I have my own biases, but I vet their materials. I look at their sources. I look at where they're coming from. Nobody's perfect. I don't align 100% with anybody, but I know when people are doing the work, good work, and I appreciate good work. So they might not say what you want to hear because you want to go to the UFC and chant USA, USA, as if USA has anything to do with a fight, the sport of MMA. It's so silly. It's not the Olympics, folks. It's not National Pride Day when you go see a Russian and a Kazakhstan guy duke it out in the octagon. I just don't get it. But it's such a reflexive thing, right? Somebody starts chanting it, everybody chants it, because we're so well programmed to be jingoistic, nationalistic, service providers to the players and their service providers. I don't know. We have to make a living. Somebody's got to pay us. So anyway, I think these guys are extremely good, and you should know their work, even if they're not telling you a CNN or Fox News or New York Times or Washington Post take on what the Russians think, what the Chinese think. I like to go to the source. What do Chinese people think about this, that? What are they trying to do? What do they say they want to do? Not the propaganda, but when they actually tell you what their plans are and what they're trying to do, what do they say? What's it mean to them? This whole Ukraine war, it didn't start overnight. It didn't start when Russia invaded. And it's absurd to say we just can't have people crossing borders. People have crossed borders forever. And it's not going to magically stop because somehow we came to the end of history. We're not at the end of history. Conflicts are going to continue. They're going to become more balkanized, if I can use that term. There are going to be more civil wars in the future for many reasons that are aspects of the predicament we're in right now that we sometimes call the poly crisis or whatever. So I think it's, if you're interested in having an informed opinion, then you have to look at some of these independent journalists. You have to understand what Palestinian journalists are saying, what Syrian journalists are saying, what Russian journalists and Ukrainian journalists and whatever, Chinese, Vietnamese are saying, and how they look at the world. Indian journalists, Pakistani journalists, African journalists from Nigeria or Congo, Republic of Congo, or Uganda or South Africa, whatever. You get my point, right? And these people say a lot, actually, if you want to listen and not just be, I'm a patriot. I don't listen to anybody but my preacher on Sunday and my grandma, which is fine if that's the case. Don't worry about having an opinion. Why would you care, right? It's not that entertaining. If you're not interested in politics and economics and geopolitics and history, don't bother with it. Just don't have an opinion. Just say, I don't know anything about that shit. A lot of my friends say that to me all the time. Stephen, I don't know anything about that shit, and I don't care. And then they tell me what they do care about, and it turns out they know a lot about what they care about. They know a heck of a lot about what they care about. And so I can learn a lot from them about what they care about. And they don't have to care about what I care about. It really doesn't matter, right? My preaching to you or anybody else about overshoot isn't, or the polycrisis or collapsology isn't going to inspire you to give up an hour at the game console or going to the football game in order to organize with your community to discover and create a better way of life before the disaster hits, before all the cascading feedbacks of disaster happen. It's not going to convince you to lay down your life, to kick out all the brutal, idiotic, dark tetrad institutional leaders we have. They have the power, we don't, and they're going to kill you if you fight them. So you have to be willing to die. If you're going down the Ho Chi Minh Trail to fight the corrupt latest coup winner, perpetrator in South Vietnam, and you're willing to lay down your life for the cause, wow. I mean, we just don't do that anymore. Nobody's going to be jetting off to the revolution. In the beginning of the Ukraine war, a whole bunch of LARPing macho idiots went to Ukraine to pretend like they stood with Ukraine and they were going to fight toe to toe. And I'm sure there are still mercenaries there. But, and on both sides, whether you want to talk about North Koreans for the Russians, I hate batteries. So anyway, I've been informed that lunch is served, so I'm going to go now. But I will continue along this vein when I discuss these 3 articles I want you to look at. So I'm taking a break. I'll see you in a few minutes.
Around Dodge City and in the territory on West, there's just one way to handle the killers and the spoilers, and that's with a U.S. Marshal and the smell of gun smoke.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to bring to your attention. We're talking about Ukraine at the moment, just by way of a kind of contemporary, up-to-date, in the news, current event, contextualization of what I mean by the Vietnamization of the world. So as I've said before, proxy wars you're not supposed to send your own boys to fight proxy wars. You use other people to fight your proxy wars. And in this case, the United States of America, the city on the hill, the repository of the end of history is using Ukraine to fight Russia. And so are the Europeans, by the way. Anyway, Kit covers this story pretty well and has been for quite a while. So if I butchered his name earlier, it's Kit Clarenberg. So he published this yesterday, and I think it's pretty good for a couple of reasons I'll show you. But anyway, so he's just talking about the war, kind of putting it in context. But the thing that's quite interesting is, well, he points out that the support for the war in Ukraine has diminished. Well, the support for a negotiated peace has risen. Ukraine at the moment is pretty much of a demographic horror story. Lots of people have left Ukraine and had been leaving Ukraine for quite a while. Many more left after the outbreak of the war. And of course, you have the casualties mounting up. And, that's not a good thing. So regardless of what happens in the future, whether or not there are European troops in Western Ukraine or not, Ukraine is in trouble for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the poly crisis won't help. Overshoot won't help. Climate change won't help. The global economy is going to go into the garbage disposal over the next 20 years. It's all bad. Unfortunately, it's tragic, and it's just a terrible situation. But, it's a border war. It's between two old nations, that are very, very related in so many ways. And that makes it even more tragic. But anyway, so he talks about London's reverie of breaking up Russia into readily exploitable chunks dates back centuries. And that's true. I've read a dozen books on Russia, Ukraine, the region, history books about various wars involving that region, those countries. And it is a fact that Russophobia and hating on Russians has been going on forever. Why? Because they're a frightening prospect in some ways, and you have to look at the context. Obviously, the Soviet Union, the Cold War, that's a different context than the first Crimean War or whatever. But anyhow, Napoleon's Grand Army goes to Moscow. It didn't work out too well. Hitler tries to go to Moscow, didn't work out too well. On and on, so whatever. But Britain, for some reason, hates Russia. And it's funny because, the kings and all that, they were all related. the king of England and the Tsar of Russia and all that. I mean, it's so incestuous and bizarre. The history is tumultuous, the Habsburgs and so on. So, yeah, this is a thing. So he has a link here, and he wrote about that. So Franco-British plot to dismember Russia. And, of course, these are well-researched pieces of journalism. And you talk about the Maidan coup 2014. There's tons of information on that now. Lots of people have done investigative reports, investigated journalism. There have been books written like Provoked and so on. There's several of them out that are very, very good that tell you what this is all about. And it's not like anybody wants to know. But anyway, this is part of the great game that I keep referring to. It's just competition over influence and resources and control of energy and resources. Yeah, it's the whole thing, never ends. So the Great Game, 1.0, the beginning of the 20th century was all the competition between the Russian Empire and the British Empire for control of what they called the top of the world, Afghanistan and that region and so on. All the trade routes to China and whatnot, the land trade routes to China. So Britain rules the waves, but it doesn't rule Eurasia, right? That's a big chunk of land, and there's lots to compete for there. And I'm fascinated by Young Husband, who is one of the players of the Great Game. And in one of my stories, he factors in. But anyhow, so in July that year, a precise blueprint, we're talking July 2014, for the current proxy conflict was published by the Institute for Statecraft, a NATO MI6 cutout founded by veteran British military intelligence apparatchik Chris Donnelly. So it's a Wayback Machine. It's a resource for stuff on the web that might not be up anymore. So this article, it's in there. And it lays out the whole plan ad nauseum. And there are pages and pages of this document. You can download it and learn all about it. And it's quite interesting. So anyway, he goes into this in his article. I won't go through it all, but the Donbass Civil War, and he wrote about that as well. So they were trying to gin up an armed conflict of the old-fashioned sort with Russia, which Britain and the West could win. And this is a quote. So the Anglo-American designs of using Ukraine as a beachhead for all-out war with Moscow dates back even further. So he goes back to this 1957. And this is a huge PDF that the CIA put out. It's all been photographed and archived. And you can do due diligence on this stuff and, learn about it. It shouldn't be surprising. If you want to look at the Vietnamization of the world, you can look at all kinds of things in Indonesia, in Central America, in South America. They're always doing things like this, the Shah of Iran and all that kind of thing. So it's fascinating, to be honest. It's really interesting. I better shut that. It seems like it's heating up the CPU. Might be something going on there. They're watching. So he goes into that. It's pretty interesting. And here's a quote. Some Ukrainians are apparently only slightly aware of the differences which set them apart from Russians and feel little national antagonism. Nevertheless, important grievances exist, and among other Ukrainians, there is an opposition to Soviet authority, which often has assumed a nationalist form. Under favorable conditions, these people might be expected to assist American special forces in fighting against the regime. So they had plans to invade Crimea, the United States, and use proxies to stir up trouble with the Soviet Union and all that, going way back. But anyway, so he delves into this. And it goes back to World War I when Germany created fascist puppet state in Ukraine. And of course, the nationalist Ukrainians were really friendly with the Nazis. So it's a complicated history, and inhabitants of the Donbass, resisted Ukrainian nationalists and at one point created a separate republic independent of the rest of Ukraine. In the following years, they defended Soviet rule and Russian interests, often attacking the Ukrainian nationalists with more zeal than the Russian leaders themselves. During the German occupation in the Second World War, there was not a single recorded case of support for the Ukrainian nationalists or Germans. So this goes way back. So that was the, independent state back in the old days. So anyway, without going through all of this thing, it's fascinating reporting, and it puts things in context. So, the mainstream media guys will tell you that, oh, Putin wants to give people a history lesson. Ha ha. It's just, his way of pulling the wool over your eyes. But the fact is, there is history there. And there are various factions that either are comfortable with Russia, with being close to Russia, with trading with and being a border state with Russia. And then there are other factions that would rather be more aligned with Europe. So it's complicated. And it's not a simple thing. So anyway, I want you to read that. This one is excellent, The Sloth Economy. And he also talks a little bit about war here, too. But basically, let me propose a thought experiment stemming from last week's discussion on fundamental mistake all industrial nations make. Since it's slowly becoming common knowledge that infinite growth on a finite planet does not belong to the realm of the possible, let's play with the idea, what if we indeed gave up on economic growth? Could we willingly moderate our economic metabolism to enhance our chances of survival as a civilization? And he goes through the usual stuff, which is very interesting about energy and peak this, that, and the other thing, and how dependent we are on oil, and when that starts to run out or become too expensive to pull out of the earth and refine, whether it's coal or other fossil fuels, everything starts to fall apart in terms of the modern techno-industrial civilized world that we're accustomed to, that we grew up in. Talks about tipping points, and so, by this time or that time, but we're looking at things really unraveling from now on, and I think by 2030, everyone on the planet's going to recognize that it's unraveling. So when the net energy, resources fall by 85% of gross output today to less than 50% by the middle of the century, 70% drop in the amount of net energy derived from oil. And you need oil for everything. So I've done videos on his work, The Honest Sorcerer, before, and I think you should subscribe to him or buy him a coffee. He does good work. So he talks about the decline, the energy supply, all that stuff. And then he brings up the wars, right? So the economy is going to go down anyway. We're going to simplify whether we want to or not, whether we do it deliberately or not. It's just going to happen. That's why I say circumstances is the most brutal dictator there is, because it's just going to happen. Physics and biology and other laws of nature make it so, and there's nothing that storytelling apes can do about it. Clever storytelling apes, their stories aren't going to save them. Their beliefs aren't going to save us. So he says, sure, wars could be waged for resources, but after a short while, even that project, requiring a heavy energy and material investment, could prove to be futile. And since deindustrialization also destroys the scientific technological base of a nation, developing cutting-edge, high-end weapons systems, such as hypersonic missiles, also becomes impossible, leaving these nations only with low-cost systems produced in moderate quantities. Again, no country can deindustrialize and remilitarize at the same time. And that's what we're seeing with all these car companies setting up shop in the United States, and Europe buying liquefied natural gas from the United States at a premium. I mean, Europe deindustrialized. So did the United States. That's because of global financialization, and labor arbitrage, as I keep saying, and so China can compete now. And, we lost the plot a long time ago, as if we ever had it. I mean, it's just hubris and mistake after mistake, and we never learn. And of course, normal people don't learn because they don't have time and energy to pay attention to all this stuff. So the players, the people who, the lawyers and the CEOs and the accountants and all the service providers of the great game and the players themselves, they just continue doing what they do because they were brought up and trained to play that game. And, they went to whatever university and they learned how to compete and fit in like the American psycho. I just want to fit in. And so you can't expect them to do anything different. They've been programmed for this BS. So you can't deindustrialize, and remilitarize. So the fantasy of Europe deciding it's going to spend more money on defense, it's a joke. It's never going to be what they think it's going to be. It's a physical impossibility. There are limits to growth, period. And so it's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of imagination. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of everything, materials. It's stupid. We should be investing in people, in transitioning to a hotter world, in more resilient electrical grids, because this global heating thing isn't going to stop. There's no miracle technology that's going to save us. We're not going to be pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere, and we're not going to be, geoengineering the planet. There's lots of information about that if you want to educate yourself on those systems and how they're not going to save us. You can do that. But anyway, it's a bloody waste of time. Investing in war instead of peace is stupid. I'm sorry to say it. So if you're all excited about one side or the other, don't be, because both sides are just throwing good money after bad, wasting energy, wasting time, wasting materials, and killing people. And not just people. The sixth extinction is rapidly turning into the seventh. It's out of control at this point. So he says this is not to say that there will be no wars in the future. Quite to the contrary, instead of large-scale, high-intensity wars, however, we are more likely to see low-intensity civil wars waged by small arms across borders and cross-border skirmishes, terrorist and cyber attacks exploiting infrastructure and the like, all accelerating those involved towards further deindustrialization and economic political collapse. If you want to know about that, you can look at the Horn of Africa. You can look at Central Africa. You can look at what goes on there in Congo and Uganda and whatnot. Pick a place that isn't a super rich, weird country in the global north, and you can learn all about what that is and what that looks like. You want to watch Black Hawk Down again? Read a book about Black Hawk Down. See the Black Hawk Down documentary on Netflix or wherever, HBO Max, whatever it is. Go ahead. You can see what that looks like. So the banking sector is in trouble as well. And of course, he contextualizes this, alluding to Germany after World War I, but it's going to be different, obviously. And he also says this kind of collapse, it takes a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's just a slow decline, and it accelerates, but it still takes time. So it might take a generation or so before it really starts to hurt. And by the time we've simplified back to the age of making bricks and using donkeys, and I'll show you this picture here in a minute, it'll be a while. So if you want to, get rich and, have a lot of fun rearranging deck chairs and getting invited to the right parties and buying yachts and sports cars, get busy, do it. Do it now because you're not going to have a lot of time left. So make your fortune quick and spend that money because it's not going to get much better. And you say BS, we're making progress all the time. Yeah, decline and collapse isn't going to smell like blood in the soil. That's a riff off of Blood in the Soil. It's going to smell like and look like progress. And it's going to be exciting, but it's going to be progress to Never Never Land because it's not going to take us where you think it's going to take us. And you'll know this sooner or later. So the service economy will prove to be an illusion too. Without cheap products, energy, and raw materials to provide services with, and without large swaths of people with money to spend, citizens of post-industrial nations will have to learn the hard way what the true basis of an economy is. So here's a picture of a Chinese worker with a little cart and a donkey or a mule, and he's got his bricks. And, we're going to be doing stuff with caloric energy as opposed to diesel fuel. But we're going to have a lot of resources for a while, coal and so on, and we'll be able to do it. And he also talks about how we're going to have metals will be melted down and new tools will be made out of them and so on. And so we will be making use of all the garbage and all the stuff in the cities that we can recycle. So that economy will go along for quite a while. Far from being a smooth ride across the globe, the coming deindustrialization of the world will be highly uneven, but still a rather protracted affair. So uneven, right? I mean, some places are suffering right now a lot more than somebody in Toledo, Ohio, for example. Trying to become a hegemon or to create an empire will become impossible in this world of steady decline, though. Instead, sloths and other small mammals will finally have their day in the sun as the dinosaurs of the industrial age slowly turn into fossils themselves. Nice turn of words there. The Honest Sorcerer, what's this called again? The Sloth Economy. And, I pay these guys sometimes, like I'll subscribe for a while and then I'll unsubscribe because I can't afford to subscribe to everybody. So, but I always try to buy a coffee or subscribe for a period of time or whatever, just to support these people because they do good work. So the next one is Simplicius the Thinker, and he's good too. Of course, he's looking at things from a more Russian perspective, but not with total, complete, narrow-minded bias. He does his research and he looks at both sides of the picture, and he does great journalism about the war in Ukraine. And he's talking about what's going to happen. What's the deal? I mean, what are these guys? What's the play here? With Zelensky and the Europeans and the meeting with Putin. What are they trying to do? And he goes through a lot of stuff. He has a lot of sources and he explains what he thinks about it. It's just really good journalism as far as I'm concerned. And you'll have a much better understanding of what's going on over there if you're capable of looking at it from various perspectives and taking on board more sources than usual, than you might if you're just watching CNN or MSNBC or CBS News. These are all propaganda outlets, seriously. There's that meme where all the stations across the world are reading from the same script. Trust me, it's scripted. Very few real journalists anymore at the Economist or Business Week or anything. It's not your daddy or granddaddy's newspaper anymore. So he, like I said, he's got a lot of really great people here, and this was interesting. This Ukrainian commentator, he's talking about what he thinks going to happen with Zelensky in the States. Basically, he says during Zelensky's visit to Washington, he will be offered to sign a peace agreement, announce elections in Ukraine, and leave the political scene. This is claimed by this guy, this journalist here. So, or this, yeah. So on Monday, Zelensky will be offered to sign a broad, comprehensive peace agreement and announce elections in Ukraine because of peace. Here's what they will promise him in return: full guarantees of personal security, security for his family members, preservation of capital, and the opportunity to become a director in Hollywood or a politician. They will try to buy him, convince him that he has no other way out. Zelensky also will be discouraged from participating in new elections. So he brings up the fact that Putin isn't going to negotiate with Zelensky because they didn't hold an election, and he's not an elected official anymore. And a lot of people in Ukraine think that. So until they have an election, and somebody else is in there that's duly elected, Putin's not going to negotiate with Zelensky. But who knows what's going to happen. So anyway, he goes into all that, and it's pretty interesting with really great sources. He even cites the Wall Street Journal. So, there you go. Even the Wall Street Journal is talking about these things. Then he goes to the battlefield and he explains how the cream of the crop units, Ukrainian units, were able to curtail one of these, they call it bunny ear, advances by the Russian 132nd Brigade. And then he goes and discusses the battlefield stuff with good sources from all over the place, all sides, and geolocated and all that kind of stuff. It's not BS. It's good journalism. And he looks at all the state of affairs, and also how they're, the journalist said, when are you going to stop bombing civilians, in Ukraine? Actually, the Russians aren't bombing civilians. They could lay waste to Kyiv if they wanted to, but they're not. They're bombing facilities that make stuff for long-range missiles and so on, and they're killing soldiers. This is a war, a real war, as opposed to bouncing the rubble in Gaza and killing children and with headshots from snipers. Yeah, okay, we're good at bombing shit, aren't we special? You're bombing poor people and civilians. We do it, actually. So you point the finger, every accusation is a confession, and actually that's what we're doing. But the lady, the journalist, just is programmed to ask that stupid question. And I don't like Putin. I don't like politicians. I think they're all assholes. But at least Putin has a brain. At least he's rational. At least he's strategic. At least you can play game theory with him if you're smart enough to. Trump is just a product and a goofy guy, and all of his little sycophantic cabinet, Rubio and all those people, they're sick. Their ideological sludge is wrecking their brains, and they're just wrong about everything. They don't understand physics and biology, and they don't understand reality. And, J.D. Vance and his religiosity and whatnot, it's not going to help anybody. Normal people get crushed, None of this making war on Russia is going to help anybody, any normal human being in Europe or in your own private Idaho or wherever. It's not going to help anybody. It's good for nothing. So he cites this guy, Ukrainian. He cites all kinds of Ukrainian sources that are on television in Ukraine. So he's not a Putin dude. He's not a propaganda outlet. He's not like a Russian intelligence cutout. He's just a good journalist who does the damn work that I wish other people would do in the mainstream media, the corporate media. But they don't serve truth. They serve the corporation, the big shareholders, including the CEO, the people with the compensation packages that include stock and whatnot. So he goes through this whole thing, and it's so good. A lot of information there. And, you'll learn a lot from that. So I'm going to leave it there just to say that there are good journalists out there that are shedding light on current events today. And if you're interested in current events, look at these people and do some reading, read some books. And if you're not interested, you don't have an opinion, that's fine. Just don't have an opinion. Just admit you don't know anything about it and you don't care. And go about your business and send me a snapshot of your Lamborghini and, a snapshot of your, beach vacation or whatever. And I will be duly impressed. Trust me, sincerely, duly impressed. So next time I'm going to go into my theory, thesis, idea, whatever, of the Vietnamization of the world. And it has to do with proxy war, forever war, proxy war type thing, and strategic sequencing, and the idea that the United States, the business model, is not to win wars. It's just to keep, pressuring to control the resources and the energy. And that's good for American people to a certain degree, but it doesn't help everybody because inequality in the States is ridiculous. And people get screwed in the U.S. all the time. And just the other day, there was another mass shooting in New York City. So there's that. There's health issues and so on. Americans hate each other. It's like they're at each other's throats all the time. So you think you're the best and you're all together as Americans, USA, USA, but you hate each other, and you go after each other all the time. And you just can't lay off of the world. My belief is that if the United States of America would just go home and take care of their own business, leave the rest of the world alone, things would be better for everybody. And our future would be a little bit less painful and horrific and violent than it is now and it will become as the days pass. And the kind of violence that we're experiencing today might not be like World War II level violence, but it's violence and it's there and it's going to get worse. It's going to get more chaotic and scary. So Vietnam is an interesting history. You should look into that. And I'll leave it there, and we will come back and talk about those things next time. So thanks a lot for listening, and take good care. Have a good week. Bouillon tea, out.
And you're going to die.
Mrs. Lassiter, is there anything I could say that you would listen to?
Nothing.
And good day, madam.
Till we meet again, Marshal.